Breaking news today. Tragic F-16 news reaches Ukraine. One setback for Kyiv's plans to take on Russia in the air in early 2024 is the possibility of a 6-month delay in the arrival of the first Danish F-16 fighter fighters bound for the country. The Defense Ministry of Denmark has announced that the first 6 fighter jets would not be delivered to Ukraine until the second quarter of 2024. Instead of the opening days of the year as formerly thought, the current schedule indicates that the donation is expected to occur in the second quarter of 2024. The Guardian and the Kyiv Post published a statement from Copenhagen in which the capital stated that the primary concern is the completion of training for the Ukrainian crew who would be operating the planes. Berlingske, a Danish news site, was the first to disclose the schedule modification. Almost immediately after, an aviator from the Ukrainian Air Force seemed to imply that the country had not yet gotten formal confirmation of the rumors and that the planes would arrive in the spring. Newsweek has sent an email requesting comment from the Ukrainian Air Force and the Danish Defense Ministry. The first 6 F-16 fighter jets are scheduled to land in Ukraine around the new year after the two countries' announcement in August 2023 that they would be sending fighter jets to the country. The jets were highly sought after by Kyiv, who believed they would enhance Ukraine's aerial competition with Russia and allow for more frequent strikes on strategic targets. Ukraine has been utilizing older, Soviet-era jets to fire NATO-standard munitions. The F-16s, with their more contemporary avionics and radars, are geared to do the same. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has lasted for nearly 2 years, reducing the number of aircraft available to the Ukrainian Air Force. However, before Ukrainian pilots can take to the skies, they must complete the challenging process of integrating the new, more advanced platform. This effort requires new facilities, training, infrastructure, and changes to the aircraft. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the Dutch government has begun making arrangements to transfer 18 F-16 jets to Ukraine on December 22. The delivery of F-16s is one of the most important elements of the agreements made on military support for Ukraine, stated Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. Earlier this week, Norway said that it will aid in the training of Ukrainian pilots on the F-16 fighter jets by sending 2 of the planes to Denmark. As reported on Thursday by Belgian broadcaster RTBF, the country will also deploy 2 F-16s to Denmark to train pilots from Ukraine throughout the year 2024. Now learning to fly F-16 fighter jets in Denmark, having completed a basic program of training in the UK Defense Ministry announced in late December, referring to the first cohort of Ukrainian pilots being taught by the UK military. While some F-16s were being trained at an airbase in Arizona, others had landed at a Romanian facility that was specifically built to teach pilots from Ukraine in early November. An unprecedented campaign of sanctions was put on Russia's economy after its invasion of Ukraine in 2022 by a coalition of Ukraine's allies, led by the United States. Russian President Vladimir Putin would be forced to prioritize either the war or his faltering economy, according to numerous analysts, including U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and EU sanctions envoy David O'Sullivan. However, these forecasts have been wrong about Russia's economy. In 2023, the Russian economy will outgrow the world economy due to record-breaking governmental spending. While the International Monetary Fund predicts a 3% growth for the latter, the Russian government projects a 3.5% growth for the former. Putin will surely take pride in claiming that Russia's economy grew by more than 3% in 2023 when the final numbers are in, especially in speeches given before this spring's presidential election. But these numbers are more indicative of economic overheating than of health. Putin is actually confronted with an insurmountable trilemma due to the severity of the difficulties plaguing the Russian economy. He faces 3 formidable obstacles: ensuring macroeconomic stability, maintaining the living standards of his populace, and funding his prolonged conflict against Ukraine. Spending more money to accomplish the first 2 goals will lead to inflation and make it impossible to accomplish the third goal. Despite Russia's economic growth, which has been aided by high oil and gas earnings, skilled financial management by the Russian government, and a lack of strong enforcement of Western sanctions, there are increasing imbalances within the economy. Putin is not expected to bring up the fact that the war is responsible for more than a third of Russia's growth, with defense-related companies experiencing double-digit growth rates ahead of the Russian election. There is a little lag on the part of civilian industries that make things for the front as well, such footwear, clothes, and medication. Russia's promising economic outlook for 2023 masked risky compromises made for the sake of immediate gratification. Significant issues stemming from the conflict will persist even if the financial leadership in Moscow manages to stabilize the economy by the year's end. Major disruptions brought on by massive investment in the defense sector, growing shortages of tools and equipment as a result of the sanctions regime's tightening grip, and public health programs that receive inadequate funding are all examples of these problems. Although the present situation is not now occupying the Kremlin's thoughts, future generations will bear a tremendous burden as a result. The transformation of plowshares into swords. Significant shifts in the Russian economy have resulted from the conflict. Moscow has redirected its policies in order to finance its military struggle with Kiev, keep its military and police forces operational, and integrate the lands it has seized from Ukraine. The combined weight of these priorities' expenditure obligations poses a danger to Russia's economic stability. In 2024, the conflict will consume 6% of GDP, or over 8% when national security spending is included, according to the Kremlin. While this is an improvement over the 3.8% of GDP that the US spent on the Iraq War, it is still far lower than the enormous sums that the USSR allotted during its stagnant years and invasion of Afghanistan, 18% of GDP. For the first time in Russia's post-Soviet history, military spending has surpassed social spending, which is now less than 5% of GDP. There is a danger to social and developmental requirements posed by this shift toward a militaristic economy. A total of $18 billion has already gone to the 4 regions of Ukraine that were annexed, and over $5 billion is projected to be transferred from the federal budget to the regions in 2024. This kind of investment is simply going to further widen the gap across regions in Russia. Instead of investing in Russia's crumbling housing stock, the Kremlin is putting its money into constructing new homes and roads in occupied territory. To make up for what Russian forces brutally demolished during their invasion, the military sector in Russia has grown to the point where it dominates the economy. Businesses in the military industry are already running at full steam ahead, so any increase in demand would likely result in price increases as a result of the industry's limited capacity to meet the demand. There is an exceptionally low unemployment rate of 2.9% because the government spends an excessive amount of money on the military and takes jobs away from civilians. A typical 4 to 5% unemployment rate was observed in Russia before the conflict. There are 850,000 more individuals working for the government and the military than there were in late 2022 to 23. Shortages of skilled professionals and blue-collar workers were exacerbated in 2022 due to the emigration of around 500,000 Russians caused by the invasion of Ukraine. At the same time, living standards have improved across the country, and the poverty rate has fallen to 9.8%, the lowest it has been since 1992. Of course, there are regional differences. Low-income groups have seen the quickest development in regions that have sent a large number of men to fight in Ukraine, such as Chechnya, Buryatia, Altai Krai, Altai Republic, and Dagestan. The distribution of monies by Moscow to the relatives of the wounded and deceased is likely to maintain this relative improvement in affluence. The overarching goal of the Kremlin is to make its population believe that everything is back to normal, and if anything, even more prosperous. Due to the necessity to compete for personnel from well-paying military facilities, salaries in both the military industry and civilian manufacturing have been pushed higher by labor market distortions. In the meantime, consumption is being driven by Moscow's large payouts to soldiers and people mobilized to fight in Ukraine. Concurrently, families are being temporarily shielded from economic realities by the government's distribution of subsidized mortgages, made possible by an abundance of inexpensive credit. There is a lack of their perception of a fleeting illusion of prosperity has been generated by the interaction of growing wages, labor shortages, and military spending. The alternatives available to Moscow in response to the worsening labor shortfall are not pleasant. The government can try to locate more migrants to fill the increasing number of openings, implement round-the-clock production, or promote the hiring of women and youths in historically male-dominated occupations. However, the situation would deteriorate even further if these adjustments were implemented. Russian businesses are already facing a labor scarcity.